The air was thick with tension in a quiet suburban street in 2017, the kind of tension that signals something ordinary has quietly twisted into the extraordinary. Emily had always believed her life was perfectly ordinary. A loving husband, a stable home, a sense of comfort she never questioned. But sometimes, the heart does not obey reason. And in that moment, a single glance across a crowded room would set a series of events into motion that no one could have predicted. It was a look filled with unspoken longing, dangerous curiosity, and a forbidden spark that would change everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and desire. Disclaimer: this is a dramatic content for awareness and discussion only. Emily's story begins in a quaint apartment complex in Chicago, where her marriage, once full of laughter and tender routines, was starting to show subtle cracks. It wasn't dramatic, at least not yet, but the small betrayals, the unnoticed glances from strangers, and the silent frustrations of unmet expectations had been quietly stacking up for months. Little did she know, someone close to her, someone she trusted implicitly, had been quietly nurturing feelings that should have remained locked away. The stakes were high. Her sense of security, her emotional well-being, and the delicate balance of her family's world were all on the line. It started innocuously. Late-night texts, casual conversations that stretched longer than necessary, small gestures of attention that, at first, seemed harmless, even flattering. But human desire has a way of evolving quietly, subtly, until it reaches a point where control slips entirely. Emily began noticing things, the way he lingered on her words, the way his eyes followed her when no one else was looking. It was intoxicating, terrifying, and completely forbidden. Every day became a battlefield between conscience and temptation. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage where hidden desires and unspoken truths danced dangerously close to discovery. Emily's husband, Mark, remained oblivious to the subtle changes, blissfully unaware that the foundation of their marriage was quietly eroding. And yet, the tension was palpable, like the calm before a storm that could erupt at any moment, leaving devastation in its wake. Emily's inner conflict grew with each passing moment. Could she resist the pull of something so profoundly wrong, yet so undeniably thrilling? Was it possible to navigate the maze of loyalty, love, and forbidden temptation without losing herself completely? The questions gnawed at her, keeping her awake at night, tangled between fear and desire, between what she should do and what she wanted. And then it happened. A small, seemingly insignificant event that would set everything ablaze. A shared secret, whispered in a moment of vulnerability, ignited a chain reaction neither Emily nor the other person involved could have anticipated. Hearts raced, boundaries blurred, and the thin line between love and betrayal vanished in an instant. What would Emily do now? Would she step back and protect everything she held dear? Or would the forbidden passion consume her entirely, leaving heartbreak and chaos in its wake? The answer loomed just beyond reach, threatening to explode into a storm of consequences she could no longer control. If this story has gripped you so far, comment crossed lines. Share it with those who need to hear this tale, and subscribe to Taboo Romance Stories TVc for more shocking, emotional, and taboo stories in the Torn Between Desire and Conscience playlist. Turn on the notification bell, because what happens next will unravel deeper secrets, forbidden desires, and devastating twists that no one saw coming. The weeks that followed were a dangerous dance, where every glance, every word, and every fleeting touch became a minefield. Emily's heart ached with a mix of guilt and desire, her conscience warring violently against the thrill of the forbidden. Each morning she would wake with a sense of dread, wondering if Mark had noticed the subtle changes in her behavior. The slight hesitation before answering a text, the lingering glance toward someone who should not even exist in her emotional world. And yet, when she was near him, she felt alive in a way she hadn't in years, an intoxicating pull that defied reason, morality, and logic. It was during one rainy evening that the tension reached a new level. Emily found herself alone in the kitchen with him, James, her colleague, and the man who had ignited this forbidden spark months earlier. The rain pounded against the windows, the rhythmic drumming a perfect soundtrack to the storm brewing inside her. He leaned slightly closer, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, and the world seemed to narrow to the space between them. Emily's breath caught. Every instinct screamed at her to pull away, yet her body betrayed her, leaning subtly toward a danger she knew she could never escape. Conversations became charged with double meanings. Casual touches lingered longer than necessary, and the unspoken tension between them built to an almost unbearable crescendo. Emily began to notice how she thought of him in moments she should have been focusing on her marriage, during quiet evenings at home, while folding laundry, while Mark watched television unaware of the emotional storm raging behind her eyes. The guilt was suffocating, yet she couldn't stop herself from craving the forbidden connection that had grown like wildfire within her. And then the first undeniable evidence of exposure arrived. A text message from an unknown number. "I know what's happening. Stop before it's too late." Her hands trembled as she read the words, the threat palpable even though the sender remained anonymous. Every nerve in her body screamed with panic. Someone had been watching, waiting, tracking the moments she thought were secret. The safe illusion of privacy shattered, replaced by the fear that every action, every look, every stolen whisper could now be used to unravel her carefully constructed life. Emily tried to resist, tried to bury the attraction that had taken hold of her, but each attempt only made the desire more acute. Her meetings with James became increasingly secretive, filled with subtle signals, whispered words, and tension so thick it was almost tangible. The house felt like a prison where her thoughts were her captors, and the moments she shared with James outside her home became the only release of an emotional pressure that had been building relentlessly. One evening, the unavoidable confrontation loomed closer. Mark, sensing that something had shifted, finally asked questions that Emily could no longer deflect. His tone was calm but edged with suspicion, the kind that can slice through the hardest defenses. Emily's mind raced. Should she confess, deflect, or lie? Each choice carried devastating consequences, threatening to unravel her marriage, destroy trust, and leave emotional scars that might never heal. And just as she prepared to answer, her phone buzzed again. Another message. "Stop now or everyone will know. There is no hiding it anymore." Panic surged. Who was watching? How long had they known? And most terrifying of all, how far would the consequences reach? Emily's pulse thundered in her ears, and a chilling thought crossed her mind. Had the line already been crossed irreparably, with no path to return to the life she once knew? The tension escalated as Emily's heart and mind were pulled in impossible directions. Could she navigate the labyrinth of forbidden desire and marital loyalty without destroying everything she loved? Or was the storm she had unknowingly unleashed about to consume her entirely, leaving nothing but devastation in its wake? If this story has gripped you so far, comment "Lines Crossed," share it with friends who love emotional and suspenseful tales, and subscribe to Taboo Romance Stories TVc for more intense, gripping stories in the Torn Between Desire and Conscience playlist. Turn on the notification bell, because what happens next will reveal the dangerous consequences of secret passions, hidden betrayals, and hearts that cannot be contained. The days that followed were unbearable for Emily. Each moment of normalcy in her home felt like walking on a razor's edge. She could sense it, the invisible weight of eyes on her, the quiet judgment that seemed to hang in the air. Even when Mark was beside her, laughing, talking, and going about his daily routines, she felt the suffocating presence of something dangerous and forbidden, a secret gnawing at her from the inside. She tried to convince herself it was just her imagination, that the excitement and guilt were temporary. But deep down, she knew the truth. Every heartbeat, every glance, every small act of desire was pulling her further into a world she could never escape without consequences. James had become both her addiction and her punishment. Every interaction with him was charged with emotion so intense it left her trembling. The office, once a place of routine work and mundane meetings, had transformed into a battlefield of subtle signals and forbidden touches. A hand brushing hers while passing documents, a lingering look across the conference room, a carefully timed question that required her to lean closer than propriety allowed. Each act, no matter how small, ignited a fire that Emily knew would be impossible to contain. And then came the first sign that secrecy might be impossible. One afternoon, while Emily and James were caught in a seemingly innocent conversation in the break room, a coworker walked in at precisely the wrong moment. The casual glance that met them was just enough to ignite suspicion, a spark of curiosity that could grow into discovery. Emily's stomach twisted with fear. Was this the first crack in the wall protecting her from exposure? She could almost feel the invisible eyes of judgment, waiting for the moment to pounce. At home, the tension was no less suffocating. Mark had begun asking questions, not directly but subtly. Comments about late nights, questions about her work, and observations that seemed innocent but were laced with an underlying unease. Emily felt the walls closing in, the home she had once considered her sanctuary now a cage that amplified every heartbeat of guilt and desire. Each day became a balancing act, a game of pretense, where she smiled, laughed, and played the role of the devoted wife, all while her heart raced in dangerous rhythms fueled by secret longing. One night, the temptation became too overwhelming to resist. James had sent a message asking to meet, claiming urgency, a reason thinly veiled behind a professional excuse. Emily's mind raced as she weighed the consequences. The fear of discovery, the guilt of betrayal, the potential devastation of her family life, none of it seemed to matter when the pull of desire gripped her so strongly. That night, she left the house under the guise of a late work meeting, her pulse pounding not just from the risk, but from the anticipation of stepping into a forbidden world. The meeting place was a quiet, dimly lit cafe on the edge of the city, far enough from prying eyes to feel safe, yet close enough that the possibility of running into someone familiar lingered like a threat. James was already there, waiting, his eyes dark with emotion. They spoke first in whispers, careful to mask the intensity of their connection. But it was impossible to deny the electricity in the room. Their hands touched across the table, tentative at first, then lingering with a need that had been growing unchecked for months. Every second, every movement, carried both thrill and terror. The line between right and wrong had dissolved completely, leaving only the raw, unfiltered pull of forbidden love. They left the cafe together, walking through rain-slicked streets where reflections danced like ghosts in puddles. Emily felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread, knowing that each step, each breath, drew her deeper into a path from which there might be no return. The intimacy, the connection, the stolen moments of passion. Each one was a seed of destruction, carefully nurtured in secret. Back at home, Mark noticed the faint smell of perfume lingering in Emily's coat, the slight hesitation in her tone when she recounted her evening. His suspicion grew, like a slow-burning ember threatening to ignite into a fire that could consume everything. Emily sensed it, the unspoken tension that grew heavier each day, and yet she found herself unable to resist the dangerous allure of James, the man who had awakened a side of her heart she thought had been long buried. And then, the unthinkable happened. A text appeared on Emily's phone, anonymous, threatening, and terrifying. "I know what you're doing. Stop before it's too late or everyone will know." Her hands shook, heart racing, pulse hammering against her ribcage. Who had discovered their secret? Was it someone from the office? A neighbor? Or someone far closer than she could imagine? Panic collided with desire, and for the first time, Emily realized that the world she had been secretly building with James could unravel at any moment. The stakes escalated further as her encounters with James became increasingly desperate. They began meeting in more secluded locations, parking garages, abandoned streets, quiet parks after midnight. Every meeting was fraught with risk, every interaction a gamble with exposure and heartbreak. Emily knew that the danger was no longer theoretical. It was tangible, pressing, and suffocating. Meanwhile, Mark's suspicions became harder to ignore. He began leaving work earlier, asking questions more pointed, noticing details he had previously overlooked. Emily felt trapped between the life she loved and the desire that consumed her. Every day was a psychological tightrope. Every night a torment of passion and guilt. Each step forward a potential disaster waiting to happen. Then, just when Emily thought she might regain control, James revealed something she hadn't anticipated. A secret of his own, darker than she could have imagined, that tied their connection to a series of past betrayals, lies, and dangerous consequences. Her world, already teetering on the edge, began to tilt further into chaos. She realized that their love, so intoxicating, so irresistible, had the power not just to destroy her marriage, but to unravel the very essence of her life. Emily's mind became a battlefield of conflicting emotions: desire versus duty, lust versus loyalty, excitement versus fear. Could she navigate the labyrinth of her own heart without losing herself entirely? Or had the line she crossed months ago set her on a path with no return? If this story has gripped you so far, comment "dangerous desire," share this story with those who need to witness the consequences of forbidden love, and subscribe to Taboo Romance Stories TVc for more shocking and emotional tales in the Torn Between Desire and Conscience playlist. Turn on the notification bell, because the next chapter will reveal secrets, betrayals, and a shocking confrontation that will leave hearts shattered and lives forever changed. The following days were a blur of anxiety and restless anticipation. Emily's life had become a constant balancing act, where every word spoken and every step taken carried the weight of potential disaster. Mark's suspicion had grown into an almost tangible presence, his questions sharper, his observations more precise. Emily could feel the tension radiating off him, like an invisible wall closing in on her. Every glance she exchanged with James, every fleeting touch, had the potential to ignite a chain reaction that could destroy everything she held dear. Then came the moment she had long feared, the confrontation she had tried to avoid. One evening, Mark returned home early from a business trip, his brow furrowed, eyes sharp and searching. Emily's heart raced as she realized that the fragile illusion of normalcy was about to shatter. James, oblivious to the timing, had called her moments earlier, asking her to meet him for what he described as a serious conversation. The panic surged through her veins like wildfire. She knew that if she left, she risked exposure. If she stayed, the weight of guilt would crush her completely. Mark's voice broke the tense silence. "Emily, we need to talk." His tone was calm, but carried a dangerous undertone that made her pulse quicken. The truth was rising to the surface, impossible to deny, impossible to hide. Emily swallowed hard, her mind racing for excuses, for lies, for anything that could protect the fragile remnants of her marriage. But deep down she knew the truth had teeth, and it was ready to bite. The confrontation began slowly, a series of probing questions, subtle observations, and the unspoken awareness that something had irrevocably shifted. Emily tried to deflect, to stay composed, but the cracks in her story widened with every word. And then, like a storm breaking through a fragile dam, the truth slipped from her lips. A confession of desire, secret meetings, and emotional betrayal that had grown into something neither of them could have anticipated. Mark's reaction was devastatingly silent at first. His eyes, filled with hurt and disbelief, locked onto hers, searching for the woman he thought he knew. "How long?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. trembling with anger and heartbreak. Emily's throat tightened.
Months. I never meant for it to go this far,
she admitted, tears spilling freely. The confession hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, a weight that could not be lifted. Meanwhile, James waited at the cafe, unaware that Emily's life had already begun to unravel. When she finally met him, her eyes were clouded with tears, and her hands trembled.
"It's over,"
she whispered, her voice cracking with pain.
"I can't do this anymore. I can't risk everything I've built, everything I love. It's too much."
James's face fell, a mixture of shock, longing, and despair. The intensity of their connection, once exhilarating and dangerous, now seemed like a weapon that had cut too deeply, leaving wounds that could never fully heal. The days that followed were a quiet storm. Emily and Mark navigated the shattered remnants of their marriage, their conversations heavy with unspoken grief, regret, and the lingering echoes of desire. The trust that had once defined their bond had been fractured beyond repair, and yet, through the heartbreak, they tried to rebuild some semblance of understanding. Counseling, honest conversations, and endless tears became the tools with which they attempted to repair what had been broken. Though the shadow of forbidden love lingered like a ghost, neither could fully escape. Emily reflected constantly on her actions, the thrill and the temptation that had led her down a path of destruction. She understood the power of desire, the danger of allowing it to overtake reason, and the irreparable damage it could inflict on the people we love most. The lessons were harsh and unforgettable. Secrets have a way of surfacing. Temptation has teeth, and the heart can betray itself in ways even the mind cannot anticipate. And yet, amidst the heartbreak, there were moments of clarity, fleeting glimpses of hope that perhaps love, even damaged and complicated, could survive. Emily and Mark learned to communicate again, to confront the shadows of their past with honesty, and to try to rebuild a life that had once seemed secure but was forever altered. The experience left them wiser, more aware of the fragility of trust, and more vigilant about the choices that define the course of our lives. Emily often asked herself questions that had no easy answers. Could human desire ever be fully controlled? Is it possible to forgive the heart when it strays? And if the line is crossed once, can it ever truly be repaired? Or does the shadow of betrayal remain, silently shaping every future decision? These questions lingered like ghosts, haunting the quiet moments of reflection, reminders of the power of passion, temptation, and human fallibility. In the end, the story of Emily and James became a cautionary tale of forbidden desire, secrecy, and the consequences of crossing lines that should never have been crossed. It was a story that left scars, lessons, and an enduring reminder that while the heart may wander, the aftermath of forbidden love is often a storm from which there is no escape. If this story has moved you, comment "crossed lines." Share it with those who need to witness the consequences of desire, and subscribe to Taboo Romance Stories TVc for more gripping, emotional, and shocking tales in the Torn Between Desire and Conscience playlist. Turn on the notification bell, because while this chapter ends, the questions it raises about love, trust, and betrayal will linger long after the story concludes. This is Taboo Romance Stories TVc. Forbidden romance stories, told like never before. Stay with us for more gripping tales of passion, desire, and heartbreak that defy the rules of love and life.